Imagine spending your retirement years working for free to help your child, only to find out they are planning to throw you into a cheap nursing home behind your back. My name is Frank, and I am a retired carpenter who used my restored hearing to stop my son from selling my home and taking my freedom. I spent 45 years of my life working with my hands. I know the smell of every type of wood, from the sweet scent of cedar to the heavy smell of oak. My hands are covered in scars, and my knuckles are thick from decades of holding hammers and chisels. To me, wood is honest. If you treat it with respect, it will stand strong for 100 years. People, unfortunately, are not always as honest as wood. When I retired, I did not want to sit around and watch television all day. My wife passed away 10 years ago, leaving a quiet space in my life that was hard to fill. I decided to use my savings to buy a beautiful 10-acre piece of land in the countryside. It was covered in tall pine trees and had a small creek running through the back. My son, Leo, was getting married to Brenda around that time. They were struggling to find a place to live that they could afford. I wanted to be a good father, so I made them an offer. I told them they could build their dream house on my land. To keep things simple, I paid for the materials, and I did a lot of the heavy construction work myself. But I kept the land deed in my name. I also built a smaller guest house on the edge of the property, about 50 yards from the main house. I wanted my own space, a cozy place where I could sleep, cook, and keep my old woodworking tools. The guest house was my masterpiece. I built it using historic timber framing methods, without using a single metal nail. Every beam was held together with wooden pegs that I carved by hand. Because I loved the design so much, I registered the guest house under a historic preservation deed. This deed meant the structure could never be torn down, modified, or sold separately from the land. I did not think much of it at the time. I just wanted to preserve my best piece of work. Around the time the houses were finished, my hearing started to fail. Decades of working around loud table saws and nail guns had finally caught up with me. The doctors told me my inner ear was damaged. I had to wear heavy, beige hearing aids that sat behind my ears like fat insects. Even with the hearing aids, everything sounded muffled, like I was listening to the world from underwater. Leo and Brenda got used to my silence. They assumed I could not hear anything unless they stood right in front of me and shouted. Over the years, their attitude toward me began to change. At first, they were grateful for the free rent and the constant help I provided. But as my hearing got worse, they started treating me like a piece of old furniture. They would talk about me while I was sitting right across the kitchen table from them. They thought I was locked in a silent world of my own. I never corrected them because it was easier to just nod and smile. 6 months ago, I met a specialist who suggested a new type of middle ear surgery. It was an expensive procedure, but my insurance and my savings covered it. I decided to go through with it without telling Leo and Brenda. I wanted to surprise them on my 73rd birthday, which was just a few weeks away. The surgery was a complete success. When the doctor turned on the internal device, the world rushed back into my head with amazing clarity. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the ticking of the wall clock, and the rustle of papers. It was like being born again. But when I returned home, I decided not to tell them just yet. I kept wearing my old, broken hearing aids without any batteries in them. I did this because I quickly realized that people reveal their true selves when they think you cannot hear them. What I heard over the next few weeks broke my heart. I heard my daughter-in-law, Brenda, complaining about my presence on the property. She complained about the noise of my lawnmower and the way I walked. Leo did not defend me. He just sighed and agreed with her to keep the peace. I learned that Leo's business was in deep trouble. He had made some bad investments in a local shipping franchise, and his debts were piling up. They were desperate for money, and they were looking for a quick way out. One Saturday afternoon, I was working on the front porch of their main house. The wooden steps had started to rot, and I wanted to replace them before winter arrived. I brought my toolbox and my old baby monitor system. I used the baby monitor as a simple intercom so they could call me if they needed help, or if I needed them to hand me a tool from the garage. I placed the transmitter unit on the kitchen counter inside their house. I had the small receiver unit clipped to my belt, with the volume turned up. They thought my hearing aids were off because I had left them sitting on the porch railing near my hammer. I was kneeling on the cold wood, measuring a cedar plank, when the receiver on my belt came to life. The sound of Brenda's laughter was loud and clear. "Your deaf old father is clueless," Brenda said, her voice dripping with amusement. "We are going to sell his guest house and lock him in a cheap nursing home by Monday." My hand stopped midair. The heavy steel tape measure slipped from my fingers and made a dull sound against the wood. I sat there on my knees, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Are you sure the buyer is ready?" Leo asked. His voice sounded tight, nervous, but there was no hesitation in his tone. "Yes," Brenda replied. "The real estate agent is bringing the contract on Monday morning. The buyer wants to turn the guest house into a luxury rental property. With the money from the sale, we can clear our business debt and finally have some breathing room." "But what about Dad?" Leo muttered. "He built that place with his own hands." "Oh, please," Brenda scoffed. "He is 72, deaf, and half crazy anyway. The Shady Pines facility in town has an open bed in their state-funded wing. It is cheap, and they will take care of him. He won't even know the difference after a week. We will just tell him the county condemned his cabin. He doesn't have the wits to fight us." There was a long pause on the receiver. I waited, hoping, praying that my son would say no. I wanted him to stand up for the man who had worked himself to the bone to give him a future. "Okay," Leo finally said. "Let us do it on Monday. I will tell the agent to meet us here at 9 in the morning." I sat on the porch steps for a long time, staring at the pine trees. The air was cool, and the smell of pine was strong. My chest felt empty, as if a piece of my own foundation had been ripped out. These were the people I had loved, the people I had built a life for. They saw me as nothing more than an obstacle, a financial asset to be liquidated. I stood up slowly, my old joints popping in the quiet afternoon. I did not let them see my anger. I packed my tools into my canvas bag, took the baby monitor transmitter from the kitchen without saying a word, and walked back to my guest house. Once inside, I locked the heavy oak door. I sat down at my wooden desk, turned on my desk lamp, and pulled out my metal lockbox. Inside the box were the original property deeds, the construction permits, and the historic preservation documents. I spent the rest of Saturday reading every line of those contracts. I knew the law, and I knew what I had to do. On Sunday morning, I made a phone call to my old friend, George. George was a retired real estate lawyer who had helped me with my business for 30 years. He was a sharp man who loved a good fight, especially when it involved protecting an old friend. I told George everything. I heard him gasp on the other end of the line. "They really think they can do this to you, Frank?" George asked, his voice low with anger. "Yes," I said. "They think I am deaf and helpless. Can you prepare the paperwork by tonight?" "Consider it done," George said. "I will have everything ready and delivered to your door by sunset." That evening, a courier arrived with a thick blue envelope. Inside were the official, notarized documents. I spent the night preparing my strategy, placing each paper in a specific order in my leather folder. I did not sleep much that night. I watched the moon rise over the pine trees, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. Monday morning arrived, cold and gray. The grass was covered in a thick layer of frost that crinkled under my boots as I walked to my porch. At exactly 8:55, a black luxury SUV pulled down the long gravel driveway. It stopped between the main house and my guest house. A woman in a sharp gray business suit got out of the driver's seat. She carried a leather briefcase. Leo and Brenda walked down from the main house to meet her. Leo looked pale, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Brenda had a wide, triumphant smile on her face. They did not see me standing in the shadow of my porch. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," Brenda said to the agent. "Thank you for coming out so early." "Of course," the agent replied. "The buyer is very eager to close the deal on this cabin. They love the rustic look. Is the current tenant ready to vacate?" "Yes," Brenda lied smoothly. "My father-in-law is moving to a retirement community today. He is very happy about the change." I stepped out of the shadows and walked down the steps. I was wearing my old flannel shirt, my work boots, and my clean leather folder under my arm. My fake hearing aids were in my ears, but the power switch was visibly off. "Dad," Leo called out, raising his voice to a loud shout as I approached. "What are you doing out here in?" The cold. You should be inside packing your things. I did not answer. I walked right up to the group and looked at the real estate agent. Good morning, I said in a normal, calm tone. Leo and Brenda stared at me. Brenda blinked, surprised by how clear my voice sounded. Dad, you can't hear us, Leo shouted again, waving his hands. Let us handle this. I can hear you perfectly, Leo, I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made them both freeze. I can hear the birds, I can hear the wind, and I can hear every word you say. In fact, I have been hearing everything for months. Leo's face turned a terrible shade of white. Brenda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. What do you mean? Leo stammered, his voice suddenly very small. I had surgery 6 months ago, I said, looking him straight in the eyes. My hearing is fully restored. I heard your conversation on the baby monitor on Saturday afternoon. I heard your plan to sell my home and put me in a cheap nursing home. The real estate agent looked back and forth between us, her professional smile fading. Mr. Leo, the agent said, her voice sharp. Is there a problem with the ownership of this property? No. Brenda intervened quickly, her voice high and panicked. My husband is the owner of this estate. We have the right to sell the structures on it. I smiled, a slow, cold smile, and opened my leather folder. Actually, Mrs. Vance, they do not, I said. I handed the agent the first set of documents from my folder. This is the historic preservation deed for the guest house. I registered this building under a strict state program years ago. It cannot be sold separately from the land, it cannot be modified, and it can never be demolished. Any sale of this structure is a federal violation. The agent took the papers, her eyes scanning the official gold seal and the legal text. Her face went pale. This is a valid historic deed, she said, looking at Leo with sudden anger. You told me this was a simple residential cabin. We didn't know. Leo cried, his hands shaking. Dad, please, we are in trouble. We have debts we can't pay. That is your problem, Leo, I said. But it gets worse for you. I pulled out the second document from my folder. It was a bright red eviction notice, stamped by the county court. I handed it to my son. What is this? Leo whispered, his hands trembling so hard he almost dropped the paper. This is an eviction notice for the main house, I said. When I let you build your home here, we signed a land lease agreement. That agreement clearly states that the land belongs to me. It also states that any attempt to sell, damage, or transfer any part of this estate without my written consent immediately voids the lease. You attempted to sell my guest house behind my back. You violated the lease, and you violated my trust. You have 30 days to pack your things and leave this property. Brenda let out a sharp screech. You can't do this, she screamed, stepping toward me. We built that house. We paid for the construction. You paid for the labor, Brenda, I replied calmly. But the land beneath it is mine. Without my land, your house is just a pile of wood and drywall. And if you do not leave in 30 days, the county sheriff will remove you. The real estate agent did not wait to hear any more. She stuffed her contracts back into her briefcase and turned toward her SUV. I am canceling this listing immediately, she said over her shoulder. Do not call my office again. She got into her car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust on the gravel. Leo stood there in the cold morning air, holding the red paper. He looked at me, his eyes filling with tears. Dad, please, he let out a sob. We have nowhere to go. We will lose everything if we have to sell our interest in the house. I looked at my trembling son. The boy I had raised, the boy I had loved. I felt a deep sadness, but I felt no regret. You forgot who built the foundation of your entire life, Leo, I said. If you had come to me and asked for help, we could have worked something out. But you chose to treat me like trash because you thought I was weak. Now, you must face the consequences of your own choices. I turned my back on them, walked up the steps of my guest house, and shut the heavy oak door. I did not look out the window as they argued in the driveway. Over the next month, the reality of their situation set in. Leo and Brenda had no legal leg to stand on. My lawyer, George, handled everything with professional precision. To pay off their mounting debts, They were forced to sell their half of the property back to me for a fraction of its value. I used my remaining retirement savings to buy out their share of the main house. Once the deeds were fully in my name, I contacted a local charity that helps families in transition. I donated the main house to them. Now, a young mother and her 3 children live in that big house. They take care of the yard, and the kids play in the pine trees. Sometimes, they bring me fresh cookies or help me carry my groceries. I still live in my quiet guest house, working with my wood, surrounded by the smell of cedar and pine. I can hear everything now, but the only sounds I hear are the ones that bring me peace. I learned a very valuable lesson from all of this, and it is a lesson that everyone should remember. The strongest structures are not held together by nails or money, but by respect and honesty. If you destroy the foundation of your family, the whole house will eventually fall. If this story resonated with you, join our channel by liking and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.